Hey, welcome to JetLagged, the podcast all about TCKs and what is it like to grow up overseas. I'm your host Noah, and today I'm joined by our co-hosts Malia and Elizabeth.
Thanks for joining us as we discuss today's topic, what is it to be a TCK?
So Elizabeth, what is a TCK?
So TCK stands for Third Culture Kid, and that means a kid who has the culture of their passport country or whatever country their parents are from, but then they're living in a country that is different from that passport country or the culture of their parents. And from those two cultures, that then becomes your own unique culture, which means that you have the third culture, not belonging to any particular country, and you are a third culture kid.
So what were y'all's cultures that you grew up living in?
For me, I have lived 9 years in China. I've lived 2 years in America, which is my passport country, and I have lived 2 years in Thailand and a year in Georgia.
How about you, Malia?
I've lived in China for 11-ish years, and I've lived in America for 3 years, and in Georgia for, I don't know how long, a couple months.
And then I lived in China for 11 and a half years, in Thailand for about 9 months, America for 2 years, and I've been in Georgia more than half a year. So we've talked about what a TCK is. What makes a TCK different from a regular person? Malia.
So what makes a TCK different is that, well, obviously they've lived overseas, and sometimes they feel like they don't particularly belong to any place they lived. So sometimes, they could feel left out of things.
Elizabeth, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it also, in a way, messes with your identity because you don't know where you're from. And, even if you have another friend who's from America and lives in China, you're going to pick up different parts of the Chinese culture. And so you often feel like you don't belong in your host country, but you also don't belong in your passport country because there's different parts about the way you do life and your worldview and how you talk or just the way you interact with people that's not going to be the same as people from the same culture. I think also you can have friends in America who think, oh, well, you're from the other country, and friends in that country that see you as totally American. So it's whatever country you're in, you're never really fully a part of it.
I agree 100% because when we would go from China to America, it would be it's such culture shock because my identity was in the community I had in China, my friends, restaurants, stuff like that. And then when we go back to America, it would be I didn't really know I didn't see my cousins as cousins or my aunts as aunts. And I didn't really know what that relationship was because we grew up, or at least I grew up in such a different culture.
And I remember when I would go back to America, my cousins, because I'm Texan, but, I don't have a Texan accent, and I've never really lived in Texas longer than maybe a year. But they would call me Texanese, and it was well, I'm not Chinese. That's not where I'm from, but I'm also not actually Texan. So it was they tried to merge those two boxes together, but even with that name, I didn't fit either of those components fully.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Malia?
I think it's the same feeling for all of us, really. And I didn't know what Toys R Us was, so.
Yeah, you really miss out on parts of your culture that maybe people who live in America, for us since we're from America, people who live there, they accept it as oh, everyone from America should know this. But because you're living in a different place, you can still be American and not know some of those things.
I remember when I was telling my cousins that we got Dr. Pepper for Christmas, they were are your parents that cheap? They get you Dr. Pepper for Christmas? But then I was no, because we didn't have Dr. Pepper. We didn't have certain things that I loved about America in our country. And it was expensive and it was hard to find these things. So it was such a cool thing to get Dr. Pepper for Christmas. Yeah, and then going back to America, it's everywhere. It's so cheap.
We got Golden Grams. That was our Christmas.
Yeah, for us, we would have a Dr. Pepper can in the foot of our stocking. But that was the one time every year when we could have Dr. Pepper because you really can't find it anywhere in China or anywhere else.
Such a pain. Why do you think it's important to be a TCK, or what are the values or the things that are important to you about being a TCK, Elizabeth?
Well, I think TCK, it's your third culture kid. So you often don't have the choice to be a TCK. It's just something that happens to you. So I'm not quite sure how to answer that question. I think it's important because it shapes who you are and your identity, how you think about things. And for me, it's always been a really huge part of like even how I introduce myself to other people. It's like who I am is often tied up in the places I've been.
How about you, Malia?
Yeah, I really don't know how to answer that question either.
Yeah, I think one thing I really enjoy or like hold dearly to me as a TCK is being able to travel and experience new cultures because you get to see like you don't just see it on a screen on National Geographic, you actually get to experience it. Like you go out and go visit like local people and like go to try local foods in so many different countries, and I think that is one of the coolest thing about being a TCK. You get to fly a lot and you get to visit countries. So along with the importance of being a TCK, what are the differences you might have with a regular person?
A person that would live in America their whole lives, they would go to school and they would have that full experience of going to school. And I've been homeschooled, so I really don't know like what it is to be like to go to school and do all that. I didn't know what homecoming was or what a prom was. Never had one.
I think one of the things that makes TCKs different, even if it's not something that's inherent about being a TCK, but like as growing up, your family is often moving a lot and like your friends are moving a lot, your parents often like have a job that's easily uprooted or you're traveling a lot. So I think TCKs grow up expecting for their friends to move, which can be really hard, but it's also, I think it makes TCKs make friends easier in a way. Like I would go back to America and I was involved in a youth community for over half a year, but I never made any friends because like for those people, it was in their minds, it's like you get together for the youth community and then you just separate and you don't talk or get together outside of that. And it was really isolating. Whereas here you get to know someone and you invite them over to your house maybe a week afterwards. And the community here is just a lot. Yeah, it's different. It's knit together closer.
Yeah, similar for me, like when we were back in the States and the youth thing I was involved with, like I was there for 2 years, but like I really didn't make friends with like anyone there. And a lot of that I think it had to do with the fact that they grew up in the same schools and the same community and they all knew each other and they just saw each other on a more daily basis, and I was that weird TCK that grew up in a different country that no one really cared about. But here, like it's because like here you are a part of like youth activities and you get one another so well. You get that moving and losing friends is normal, and that just creates such a bond between people, and you get to know each other on a deeper level and have a better understanding of each other. That's what I love about being a TCK. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of JetLagged. Don't forget to send us any comments or questions for us to discuss at jetlaggedpodcats@gmail.com. That is jetlaggedpodcats, not podcast. We hope you will join us again soon.